Alrighty, we will get the ball rolling here. Thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Brian Brooks, Vice President for Advocacy and Threats Programs at American Bird Conservancy, standing in for our usual webinar host, Jordan Rudder. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared via email in just a few days. We'll be putting links in the chat, but in case you missed them, please know that we'll be sending an email to everyone who registered that will contain all links referenced today, as well as a link to the recording. Automated captions are available for this webinar. You can turn them on by clicking the CC icon. Please submit any questions you have during the presentation using the Q&A box. American Bird Conservancy is taking bold action for birds across the Americas. We work with diverse partners throughout the Western Hemisphere to prevent imminent bird extinctions, improve millions of acres of habitat with bird-friendly management practices, and advocate for and create solutions to urgent threats that put birds at risk. And thanks to support from generous people like you, we're achieving lasting results for the bird species most in need, while also benefiting human communities, biodiversity, and the planet's fragile climate. Thank you for being here to help birds across the Americas thrive. In 2025, more than 25,000 ABC supporters sent nearly 200,000 messages to legislators aimed at improving regulations for birds across the United States. I'm sure many of you are here with us today, and we are so grateful. Your bold action is making a difference for bird conservation, as you will see. From protecting vital habitats and food sources, funding for bird programs, to advancing bird-friendly legislation, ABC's policy team works tirelessly to ensure bird conservation remains a priority for decision makers across the country, working directly with lawmakers, agencies, and partners, and you, to create lasting change for wild birds across the Americas. I humbly ask that listening to the presentations, the expertise, the amount of work, and most importantly, the results, consider making a gift today directly to support the work of ABC's policy team. Your gift will help us continue to fight for stronger protections, secure critical funding, and ensure conservation efforts are driven by science-based policies. With your generous support for ABC's policy and advocacy work, we can continue to take bold action for birds and their habitats where and when they need it most, giving birds a voice where decisions are made. You can make a gift now visiting abc.org/policy or by scanning the code on your screen with your phone. Thank you for caring about birds, and a special thank you to all ABC members and supporters in the audience right now. You're making a difference for wild birds and their habitats every day. While birds don't observe political boundaries, government entities have a significant impact on bird populations through lawmaking, oversight, fund allocation, and more. Effective bird conservation depends on us working across these lines and across the proverbial aisles as well, from local city councils to state and national governments, and even U.S. participation in international legislation. Our planet, our climate, and all of the communities that depend upon them need us now more than ever. Today, you'll learn about ongoing policy efforts to advance bird conservation, ABC's outlook on navigating the dynamics of Congress and the executive, while pivoting to state-level advocacy to get even more results for birds, and learn more about the importance of engaging in policy at every level, including ways you can take action for birds all year long. Let's meet today's speakers, including myself. Again, I am Brian Brooks. I am ABC's Vice President for Advocacy and Threats Programs. I came to ABC after serving 9 years as the Executive Director of the Idaho Wildlife Federation and heading up several campaigns for the National Wildlife Federation. I have a Master's of Science in Natural Resource Management from the University of Idaho, where my research blended the relationship of natural resource sciences, policy, economics, and other human dimensions. I've utilized this interdisciplinary approach in my career, spanning habitat restoration, wildlife rehabilitation, eventually growing into the advocacy and policy arena. Annie Chester is ABC's policy director. She advocates for bird-friendly policies at the state and federal levels to support ABC's mission and on-the-ground conservation work. Her focus areas are migratory and seabird conservation. Some of the issues she has worked on include migratory bird habitat conservation funding, red knot recovery, and plastic pollution mitigation. Hardy Kern is our Director of Government Relations for the Birds and Pesticides campaign. Hardy started with ABC in January 2022. Happy anniversary, Hardy. Following 9 years as the Columbus Zoo and Aquarium He has a Master of Public Administration degree from Kent State University and a bachelor's degree in zoology from The Ohio State University. Hardy loves being a voice for wildlife and isn't afraid to use his puns in service of advocating for nature. I'll be kicking us off with some 2025 federal policy highlights and a preview of our priorities for 2026. And thank you again for joining us today as we reflect on a pivotal year for bird conservation, a year marked by meaningful progress, ongoing challenges, and renewed commitments for birds and their habitats and the people who love them. This coming year is no different. There will be defense needed to maintain the successes of last year, but also momentum to capitalize on and get some proactive wins for birds in 2026. Before we dive in, I want to paint a picture of what it takes to ensure we show up for birds as the policy team so they can recover and thrive. It takes a lot of work to educate just federal lawmakers. There are 435 representatives and 100 senators. And beyond that, ABC works in dozens of state legislatures with their own politics, issues, and solutions. And none of that accounts for federal or state agency personnel who often need to be looped in. As you can imagine, it's a monumental effort to keep lawmakers aware of the threats that are on the ground, legislation coming their way that can exacerbate or alleviate those threats, how policies translate to on the ground impacts, and they need to know the American people, their constituents especially, support or do not support such policies. To be able to inform lawmakers on all of these issues often requires an interdisciplinary approach. We've got to know chemistry when it comes to pesticides, pharmaceutical economic intricacies when it comes to saving horseshoe crabs and red knots who rely on their eggs, the science of old growth or early stage post-fire succession in tall grass prairie and how different policies can benefit their vastly different management and recovery strategies and on and on. It takes work to be able to speak knowledgeably about these many different issues birds are facing. But ABC plays these roles, developing relationships by being a trusted partner, being helpful, being honest, showing broad public support. We are able to elevate bird programs, get them funded, or pass beneficial legislation. So today we are going to walk you through the results of that work, the challenges, the wins, and the year ahead. I'll give an overview, and Annie and Hardy will dive a bit deeper into the issues, but generally, 2025 was a lot. Those of us who care about the environment spent a lot of time on relentless defense. There were a lot of executive orders issued impacting the environment, now in various stages of limbo or legal scrutiny. We saw reinterpretations of bedrock laws like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and Endangered Species Act, weakening their power to protect species. We're also seeing attempts to fracture NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act of 1970, the law that mandates American voices guide decisions that impact their environment. But the fights to prevent those proposals from being permanent are well underway, and that ground can be re-won. But aside from that defense, I want to say that 2025 was also a year of hope, too, with conservation advancements worth celebration that likely didn't make headlines during a year of busy news cycles. Across local, state, national, and international arenas, we saw significant actions taken to protect birds and their habitats. For example, we saw state-level legislation pass in California strengthening bird protections, with Migratory Bird Protection Acts proposed in several more states for 2026. Blocking a budget maneuver this last year in Virginia, which will now soon phase out industry single-use polystyrene, limiting plastics in the waterways. There were a number of great pesticide restriction or limitation bills. We'll learn more about those soon. After action by ABC and our island partners, a proposal by the Air Force and SpaceX to turn Johnston Atoll into a rocket port was canceled, a breeding ground critical for many Pacific seabirds. We've seen advancements to reduce fishery and crab harvest species birds rely on. Lake County, Illinois, a major migratory bird hotspot, saw the passage of the nation's first countywide ordinance requiring bird-friendly design for new residential developments, a model we are working to replicate nationwide. Hawaii County, the Big Island, passed an ordinance banning the feeding of invasive species, including feral cat colonies, which have had a devastating impact on Hawaiian forests and seabirds. We're looking with other islands and the state legislature in 2026 to expand those laws and protections for birds. The list goes on, but I want to wrap up by mentioning a really monumental effort that has somewhat flown under the radar, again, because of the busy news cycles of the last year. The final House and Senate budget proposals came out really good for bird conservation programs. They fared incredibly well, and that is thanks to the very narrow focus of ABC and our partners on the Senate and House Interior Appropriations Committees. ABC worked with these offices tirelessly after the president's proposed budget zeroed out many of the critical bird conservation programs. We flew people in from across the country to attest to the benefits of these programs, their cultural support, economic benefit, and so on. Ultimately, after months of these efforts, programs slated to be zeroed out in the 2026 budget were largely or fully restored in the House and Senate bills. Some line items even increased thanks to persistence of ABC and our partners, and primarily to those of you who spoke up. We can't do this work without the voices of the public. I'll give you a lightning round version of the bird programs restored or even increased in funding. The North American Wetlands Conservation Act and Neotropical Migratory Bird Conservation Funds were both zeroed out and now are fully funded at $49 million and $5 million respectively for those acts. The migratory bird joint ventures were zeroed out. Those have been increased to 17 million. That is a small percentage increase. The Hawaii mosquito program, over $5 million for research on Hawaiian forest birds that face extinction from non-native mosquitoes carrying avian malaria and other pathogens, were are included in the budget. The international programs and trade for the Forest Service, which benefits migrating birds, that was zeroed out. That's now restored back to 19 million. State wildlife grants, those were proposed were zeroed out. Those increased 2% up to 74 million. USGS Ecosystem Mission Area, these are bird programs, including the Cornerstone Bird Banding Lab. That was proposed for a 99.7% cut. Now it's only a 2% cut. The Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Units, again, proposed for zero. They saw a 5% increase. The State of the Birds funding was increased, which helps fund the Hawaiian Birds Not Mosquito Treatment Project. And I'll stop with, lastly, the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. That was proposed for zeroing out. It is now funded at $369 million. Work remains to get these signed by the president, but this budget now sits on the president's desk waiting a signature, and a large volume of work to get to this point was done, and we couldn't do it without folks like you. And then we want to replicate or improve these budgets for fiscal year 2027 as we approach those processes starting. But I do think it's worthwhile to share that there is still this support for bird conservation programs in Congress, and these wins are significant. And ABC will continue to deliver lawmaker education and necessary support. Thank you again for tuning in. Next, we are going to hear from Annie Chester and learn a bit more about specific policy wins at the federal and state level and more to come. Take it away, Annie.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian. And hopefully you can all see my screen now. As Brian said, I'm Annie Chester. I'm Policy Director at American Bird Conservancy. I focus on migratory birds and seabirds, but I also get to support some other work, which I'll talk about today. I'm going to talk a little bit about some good things that happened in 2025. Like Brian said, it was a really busy year in the policy space, but good things did happen, and we really want to uplift them. And then I will shift to talking about what's ahead for 2026, how we can build off of these 2025 victories and help birds moving forward. So I will first focus on federal issues. There is a ton I could talk about, so I'm just choosing two items that were really exciting that happened last year, and then actually the Hawaiian Forest Bird Conservation victory happened early this year. So to kick us off, I'm going to talk about red knots and horseshoe crabs. So for the unacquainted, red knots are a migratory shorebird. They have an incredible journey from South America to the Arctic every spring. It's over 9,000 miles and one direction. And in order to make that journey possible, they have to stop over along the Atlantic coast to refuel. The Delaware Bay is a really important staging ground, and it's also a place where horseshoe crabs spawn. It's a big spot for them, as well as the rest of the Atlantic coast. And the reason we're so focused on horseshoe crabs in terms of red knot conservation is because without horseshoe crab eggs, red knots would not be able to complete their migratory journey. Horseshoe crab eggs are super nutrient dense. They're great for red knots as well as other migratory shorebirds. Red knots are listed under the Endangered Species Act as threatened, and their populations are not increasing. So we really need to focus on this kind of holistic approach to their conservation, which does involve the conservation of horseshoe crabs as well. Horseshoe crabs are an incredible native species. They are a keystone species on the Atlantic coast, meaning they support the entire food web. So, from shorebirds to striped bass and other sport fish and other marine creatures, horseshoe crabs play a vital role in their survival. Unfortunately, we have seen historic declines in the horseshoe crab population across the Atlantic coast, and we have also seen a decline in egg density on beaches, meaning the number of eggs on spawning beaches. That means that shorebirds have less food when there's less egg abundance. Horseshoe crabs have similar threats, are facing similar threats as red knots. So things like climate change, um, coastal development, those are pressures. But horseshoe crabs have an additional pressure, which is commercial harvest. Horseshoe crabs are used for bait for the eel and whelk fisheries, as well as for biomedical use, which I will talk about here. So horseshoe crabs are really incredible. They have this interesting copper-based blood, which is blue, and they don't have an immune system like we do, so their blood acts as that protection against pathogens. So when a pathogen enters their body, their blood actually forms a gel around it and isolates that pathogen, protecting them. Some really smart scientists discovered this and created a human medical safety test to ensure that our medical devices and injectable therapies like vaccines are free of pathogens. So, horseshoe crab derived endotoxin tests, as they're known, have been an industry standard, making sure, again, we are healthy, we are safe when we're using these medical products. The kind of flip side of this is that the demand for horseshoe crabs places pressure on them and reduces, again, the amount of horseshoe crabs in the environment because there's mortality associated with the harvest and bleeding of horseshoe crabs. Fortunately, there are synthetic testing methods that do not require the harvest of horseshoe crabs. The problem right now, though, or the historic problem has been that there have been bureaucratic and regulatory roadblocks to the industry being able to adopt those synthetic testing methods. So we were really excited to see this year that the in the continuing resolution, actually in 2025, the continuing resolution that was passed included language that directed the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, to update its 2012 endotoxin testing guidance to accept these synthetic methods. To date, the FDA's guidance only accepts the horseshoe crab derived testing methods, meaning that industry and companies that want to use the synthetic testing method really have a lot of roadblocks in order to use it. So this directive from Congress that was included in the appropriations bill really will help move this issue forward and hopefully help companies adopt those synthetic methods without those roadblocks. And this is important because the more companies that are on board with using synthetic methods reduces the pressure on horseshoe crabs, which thereby reduces the pressure on red knots because there's more horseshoe crabs, more eggs in the environment. So we're really excited with this inclusion in the continuing resolution, and we will certainly track this issue as it moves forward. The FDA has a year to act and update its guidance, so we will be making sure that happens. Shifting gears a little bit, another really exciting development in kind of the federal funding space is in regards to Hawaiian forest bird conservation. In the Interior Appropriations Bill that just passed very shortly ago, in 2026, there was good funding levels included for Hawaiian forest bird conservation. But Hawaiian forest birds are really incredible species that live in the high elevation forests of the Hawaiian Islands. They're incredibly culturally and ecologically important species, but unfortunately, they are also extremely imperiled and facing extinction. Fortunately, there is a really dynamic partnership that includes federal, state, and nonprofit partners that is working to tackle one of the biggest threats to Hawaiian honeycreepers or Hawaiian forest birds, which is avian malaria. So non-native mosquitoes exist in these high elevation forests, and a single bite from a mosquito carrying avian malaria can kill a Hawaiian forest bird, like the iconic EEV, which is pictured on the screen in this beautiful logo here. So funding for this work is incredibly important because this partnership is working to tackle avian malaria by suppressing the non-native mosquito population using really advanced science, which we could do a whole presentation on, and ABC has a ton of resources on. But I just want to highlight that a critical step for this project is an on-site facility. And so federal funding is really important to make that happen as well as continue the existing work. And fortunately, like I mentioned, there's level funding for existing work that was included in the Interior Appropriations Bill for 2026. So this will make sure that efforts to combat avian malaria continue, as well as fund scientific research. And there was additional funds allocated that will help move the construction, hopefully, of a on-site, on-island facility forward. So, shifting gears now to state level wins, I again want to turn back to horseshoe crabs because New York passed a really exciting bill called the Horseshoe Crab Protection Act. This was signed into law by the governor in December, right before Christmas time. It was a really exciting gift. And this bill phases out bait and biomedical harvests of horseshoe crabs in state waters by 2029. And this is great for red knots, of course, because the less pressure on horseshoe crabs, the more horseshoe crab eggs available for red knots. And New York is really setting an excellent example coastwide, and we hope other states will look to New York's example and take action. Connecticut and New Jersey actually do already ban the bait harvest of horseshoe crabs. So there's really great action happening on the Atlantic coast that we hope to build on in 2026. So yeah, what's ahead in 2026? Well, on the federal side of things, continued advocacy on federal funding from Hawaiian forest bird conservation to recovery of endangered species. Federal funding makes a huge difference in making sure that work continues and species are protected. The other thing is we want to continue supporting good bird forward legislation. There was a ton of bills introduced last year that benefited bird conservation, and I hope this is a short list of some of those bills, and I hope the takeaway you get from this list is there's a lot of ways that birds can be helped through legislation, but also bird conservation is bipartisan. There's a ton of different champions on this list from different states, from different parties. We want to continue to build a bipartisan coalition of Congress members that support bird conservation and advance proposals that help birds. So we will continue to advocate for those bills. And then at the same time, we'll be working at the state level. State work is super important, and different states have different needs and different birds. And from my end, I will be looking towards a few different things. So, migratory bird protection is really a critical issue. We will be trying to support efforts in states that pass legislation that protect migratory birds. Likewise, horseshoe crab, again, protection of horseshoe crabs building off of the New York success. We want to see more coastwide action to protect the species. And then we also have collisions, so bird glass collisions, making sure we address this preventable source of mortality that kills a billion birds a year. So how can cities and municipalities and communities make their glass bird friendly through policy action? And then finally, again, as the seabird person, I'm always looking at ways we can address plastic pollution. Plastic pollution is very deadly to many seabird species, so we want to make sure we address it before it enters waterways. And different states have really creative solutions to this, and we will be sure to support those and amplify those efforts in the year to come. So I will end my presentation there, and I appreciate your attention.
Alrighty. Thank you very much, Annie. Appreciate you very much. If folks have any questions about these topics and more, please put them in the chat or save them until the end of our presentation. Next up, I will pass the mic to Hardy Kern, where he can discuss how ABC is reducing the threats posed to birds by pesticides. Take it away, Hardy.
There's my unmute button. Only been doing this 4 years. How hard could it be? Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you everyone for tuning in today. I also appreciate the shout out for my fourth ABC anniversary. The typical gift is fruit and flowers. Brian, I like peaches and orchids, preferably grown organically. Thank you. So, yeah, as Director of Government Relations for our Pesticides and Birds campaign, I have the great pleasure of working with our field teams, working with our partners at states in states across the country, working with federal partners and friends to help advance good policy, good regulation that help reduce threats to birds from pesticides and try to keep the really bad stuff from cropping up as well. And when we're talking about pesticides and birds, how they're impacted, how they overlap, there's two really main ways that we concentrate on here at ABC. Number one, how birds are directly exposed to pesticides. That could be from eating a mouse or a rat that has a rodenticide in it. That could be from eating a seed that has a neonicotinoid or another systemic insecticide on it. That could be from being sprayed by them on accident, eating insects that might have a pesticide on them. And then there's the other way, which is probably the bigger effect overall, which is the loss of invertebrates that impacts birds and bird habitat. Because birds eat a lot of bugs, we need pollinating insects to help us grow a healthy habitat that birds need to thrive and move up and down as they're migrating. Really, really important. So we focus on a lot of different things. And I wanted to break it down by what we do at the federal, at the state and local level, and then what we're doing on farms as well, because we're really taking a lot of different bites out of this apple, and it is my great pleasure to, kind of talk through how it is that we're approaching these things. So at the federal level, most of our work has focused on the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and the Department of the Interior, which houses the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as some other relevant agencies there too. The big thing that we focus on at the EPA is their role approving pesticides and putting on any kind of safety restrictions, running the process that coordinates all different agencies where there might be pesticide use and different projects that call for it and help to get some good bird-friendly regulations in there. And then complying with the Endangered Species Act, because a key part of the Endangered Species Act is actually looking at the actions of other federal agencies, not just fish and wildlife, and how their actions could impact threatened and listed species and their habitats. So there's a lot of overlap there. At the Department of the Interior, they, of course, are the ones at Fish and Wildlife that are really overseeing the Endangered Species Act. And then they're also participating in what are called pesticide consultations. That's where they, as the experts on species, can reach out to other people who know what they're doing and try to figure out the best way to lower the risk from chemicals to birds and to other wildlife. So, a lot of great work, and some of the things that we do there are not only briefing the agencies regularly, attending coalition meetings, giving advice, asking questions, pushing for updates, pushing for more changes. Lots and lots of comment periods. Annie and I, especially, I think, are very good at comment periods at this point. But one of the key ones that Brian had highlighted earlier, too, is funding. We need these agencies to be really well resourced so that they can do their jobs well, and so that there's enough people for us to go and talk to and bother about how they can help birds even more. And this year, we were thrilled to see in this minibus package that we're hoping gets signed into law, $2.5 million for the Fish and Wildlife Service to carry out pesticide consultations. That is more funding than they've had historically for folks to specifically look at how chemicals are impacted threatened and endangered species and their habitats in the US. We also saw preserve levels of funding for pesticide licensing at the EPA. This is the funding that allows for new research to be done on better ways to evaluate pesticides, new ways to lessen their impacts, the laboratory equipment, sometimes even that they need to run their own analyses. We also saw $37.3 million preserved for pesticide grants. This is money that a state or a local wildlife agency or a town in some cases can apply for to help them better monitor pesticides in their area. And the thing that we're most excited about, maybe not most excited about, but tied for excitement with, is that there were no new riders. There were no new lines of potential law in this appropriations bill that would have delisted the lesser prairie chicken permanently, or that would have blocked local control and local regulation of pesticides. These were things that were not included in that law that we were very worried might be. So, like Brian said, we had a lot of great success there. Very happy to see how that turned out. And then at the state and local level, last year we had some really great wins. Honestly, almost too many to go through, which I'm so thrilled to report. But two of the ones I really wanted to highlight was a bill that we helped work on in Connecticut that restricted the use of second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. That went into effect immediately. So it's going to lower the amount of rodenticides that accidentally wind up hurting hawks and owls and falcons and corvids and all sorts of other birds that might interact with rodents. It also had a restriction for the use of neonicotinoid insecticides on golf courses across the state. And in Connecticut, there is some farming, but by far the biggest use of these particularly nasty, noxious insecticides in the state is on golf course treatment. So we helped get a law passed that said you are not going to be able to use them in that case anymore in a few years. And we worked with local experts to make sure that it's something that was achievable for the golf course operators and was going to have the most environmental benefit. We also worked with our partners in Maine. This was something that was led by Maine Audubon, which was great, to study the impacts of neonicotinoid insecticides on wildlife across the state. It came up first as a bill that would specifically restrict the use of pesticide-coated seeds in the state for corn, soy, and wheat crops. But as happens in the legislative process, it got changed, and we're thrilled that it passed. We're going to learn more about how neonics impact birds in the state of Maine and what we can do about it. And we're hoping it'll be a good springboard for future legislation. And then kind of in the middle ground, there was some great legislation that we helped to get introduced in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Again, we work with fabulous partners. We cannot take all the credit by any means. These are always huge lifts that not only allow us to work really well with other bird groups and other environmental groups, but also with our supporters in all those states. Every time that you get an email from ABC asking you, click here to email your representatives about this particular bill, this is what you're helping us do. This only happens because you take action with us. So we had two bills to restrict the use of neonic-coated seeds that were already heard and introduced in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire, and they're going to keep moving forward this year, which we're excited about. And then down on the farm, we have our untreated seed pilot program that just wrapped up its first year. One of the biggest threats to birds from pesticides in the United States is from these systemic insecticides that go on the outside of corn and soy and wheat and sorghum and milo and all sorts of other crops. Birds can eat them and then they get poisoned. The insecticide comes off, it gets into the waterways, it gets into the soil, it kills all the things that birds like to eat. And so not only are we looking to pass legislation to help move that along, we wanted to understand how we can best support farmers and how they're able, or maybe not able, to get seed that doesn't have that insecticide on it. We had applicants from all across the country, and we're thrilled that after our first year, we had 9 different crop types in 12 different states enrolled, and almost 6,000 acres that were planted without neonic coatings on the outside of them. So we are absolutely thrilled with our results. Last week, I got to go visit some of these farms up in Minnesota, and our growers have been wonderful in sharing information with us about how they get the seed, how what challenges they run into, and what we can do to better support them. So I love that we're hitting it on all different fronts all at the same time. So what's coming up next? We had a great 2025. 2026 has already been very busy. I feel like, in just this first, gosh, it's almost February already, and it feels like it should be June from everything that's going on, but that's part of the fun. So at the federal level, we're waiting for this year's budget bill to be signed. And then guess what? We get to work on next year's budget bill where we're going to ask for all the same things, ask for more increases for bird conservation. We're going to keep fighting against individual marker bills that are bad and keep supporting the ones that help us achieve our conservation results. And we're looking forward to a lot more comment periods from EPA and Fish and Wildlife so we can keep letting them know how they can better support birds with their actions. In terms of state level legislation or local regulations, we have a lot of different states that are introducing really good pesticide legislation or that it's already out there. We have folks in Colorado, Hawaii, Minnesota, Maryland, New Hampshire, New Mexico. There's even more on here that we haven't named. I got very lucky in that I got to bring on a colleague to help me do this, Serena Chenery, who's our advocacy coordinator for the Pesticides and Birds campaign. She's jumped right in and been a wonderful help in us really expanding the work that we're able to do at the federal and the state level to keep being that voice for birds. So lots more to come this year. Look for a lot more emails from me. And then again, with our seed program, we are so excited that funding for that got extended from the One Hive Foundation. We are going to be able to keep enrolling farmers and next year enroll even more, maybe even as much as twice as many. We're getting ready to publish resources for farmers on where they can find seed that will not accidentally hurt birds in the way that the neonic coated seed does. And we're hoping to set up farm tours so that folks from state departments of agriculture and the EPA and the Department of Agriculture at the federal level can come out, can see the farms where we're supporting this really, really great neonic free bird conservation work. So I'm tired, I'm jazzed, I'm glad to be here. I know I've been here 4 years, but it feels like I started 6 months ago. And I really appreciate everyone coming together today to learn about what we're doing. And I know we already have a ton of questions, and I'm excited to answer even more of them.
All right, thank you, Hardy. Much appreciated. I'd like to welcome the presenters back on camera as we move into the Q&A portion of our webinar. If you have any questions, please go ahead and plug them into the chat. We are going to do our best to address them. We can't get to all of them, but we will do our best. So first up here, this is a broad question. I'm going to pitch it to Hardy and Annie. When working to educate senators and legislative professionals, do you find they absorb the cold, hard, fast and figures better than storytelling? What moves the needle most in conversations when you're working to get these people to care about this very important topic?
I'm happy to take that one, and I'm sure Hardy can chime in with other stories. I think both things are important. Working on the horseshoe crab issue, it's really interesting because there's a big human health dynamic to it. There's a big environmental protection part to that, but there is also clear data that horseshoe crabs are declining and that red knots are declining. So certain stories are really helpful where you have data and a really good narrative. I think both things are good. It really you know, representatives, lawmakers, they want to hear what matters to constituents. And sometimes, too, you bringing an issue that might not be a super well-known issue can also help find more data and connect you to resources, connect the lawmakers to resources. So it's kind of a both and answer.
I'll
Good
also
answer.
just toss in generally when we're working with offices, it's always helpful to make it relevant to them. So to bring up, stories or examples from their state or from their district or elevate voices of the people that they represent. And we've also had it kind of work the other way too, where, maybe you've talked to an office about something and then a few months later they know, oh, I just got a question about a bird issue. Let me contact the bird people and see if they can help us out as well. So from everything Annie was saying, it also helps to build trust and to show them that we can be a source to really help them with these issues. And then they come back to us when stuff might crop up later on.
Excellent. Thank you. Here's a question I might take a stab at, and Annie, you might too, with the efforts going on in New York this year. But this question is, has ABC adopted a revised model local code to mitigate bird building collisions? And I can take the first go at this. We do have model code language that could be inserted into municipal code that really increases the protections for birds in regards to window strikes. Um, to zoom back out a little bit, if folks don't know, we have an entire collisions team. None of them are present today, so they're the experts on this. But I can speak to it a little bit, and I hope I don't get anything wrong. But we operate two glass testing tunnels in the United States, where birds are captured, they're banded, and they're flown through a tunnel with different glass samples, and there is a net, so it's all safe, and they fly off afterwards. And through that, you can test how birds react to different patterns, different glass opaqueness, the polarization, the gradient of the sun in the sky. There's so many factors that go into how a bird might react to glass. That it's hard to put that into legislation. And so what we did is we started compiling a list on ABC's website of certain products or types of designs that meet a threat factor of a certain threshold that we could actually say this is actually going to significantly reduce bird strikes. And so what we have in that model language essentially says all new buildings or retrofitted glass, shall adhere to the threat factor rating on American Bird Conservancy's website, BLAM. And that makes it so it's really short. Typically, city council members, coding experts, mayors, they really like short language. And so we do have that model coding. If you would like to reach out to us about your efforts in your neck of the woods, please shoot us an email. It can be to our general info at email, and it will get to us so that we can help you. Annie, is there anything else at a different level you want to talk about?
Yeah, I can just mention quickly, I support the collisions team on state level bills, so that's a little bit different than what Brian was talking about with the municipal code, but there's bills that address lighting in cities as well as LEED certification that includes bird-friendly glass. So there's a lot of different approaches at the state level too that are being taken, and our collisions team is really, they are excellent. They're experts in the field. And so they're really able to take a fine-tooth comb to legislation and provide feedback and improve proposals. So there's a lot of different creative ways that we can approach this issue, and ABC's collisions team is well equipped to help with that.
Thank you, Annie. All right, I got a question for Hardy here. What is involved in a pesticide consultation? Do people come to ABC, or is there policy that the corporations must consult with the DOI in order to be approved? Extra licensing? Is OSHA involved? How does that work, Hardy?
All of the above, in a way. It's a very lengthy process, so we could do 5 webinars on this. But essentially, when a chemical is brought by a manufacturer to the Environmental Protection Agency, either something that isn't registered yet or something that has been registered for 15 years, and so its review cycle is up, it's up to the company to provide a lot of information about how it might be used, different potential safety parameters, and then the EPA reviews all that. They can ask for more information, they can ask for additional questions. Then they open it up to the public, including groups like ABC, and we can say, here's some concerns that we have, or here's what I think you've done well. And then, if there's a potential that its use could impact threatened or endangered species, it goes into the formal consultation process, which means that the EPA and Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service have to all work together to figure out what listed species could be impacted and how to mitigate those risks, how to make it so that we are going to minimize the amount of negative impacts to those species. This can take years typically for a new chemical. The EPA has been working really hard recently with Fish and Wildlife Service to develop strategies that help them to do this a little bit more efficiently, because for around 40 years, it really didn't happen very much. And then there's other parts of the process that definitely do involve, handling, human health safety, farm worker safety that are all involved in this process. So it's a really long one, and but I'm happy to talk more about it. Feel free to shoot me an email afterwards.
Thank you, Hardy. Annie, I'm going to send it back over to you. Does Delaware, Maryland, and Virginia have any pending legislation to ban wild horseshoe crab fishing?
Great question. No, they don't. But if you are in those states, we would love to hear from you. Certainly really important states for horseshoe crabs, especially Delaware. That's, Delaware Bay, New Jersey as well is an important state, but as I mentioned, they do have a ban on bait harvest. But yeah, would love to hear from you, so please reach out.
Okay, follow up, Annie. Can we farm horseshoe crabs to get the products that we need from there, get from them?
Yeah, to my knowledge, that's not a viable option, and the wild harvest is the best option. But obviously, yeah, it's risky. Especially, yeah, Delaware Bay. There have been oil spills. There's a risk for disasters. So, having a synthetic option is really the best solution here.
Okay, excellent. We got a question here that I can try to take a first go at here, but are there any studies to show the impacts of wind and solar projects on birds? These projects might have an impact across the board from collisions. Yes. Well, we do know about them. There have been some studies on both the impacts to birds from wind sighting and from solar. And it kind of depends. It's a qualitative answer. As far as all the threats go to, to total bird mortality, when you stack those next to each other, wind looks really small. But wind has an impact, an outsized impact on rarer birds that have a longer rearing cycle. And so the example of that is golden eagles. They don't start breeding until they're much older, years through, and they have a much bigger impact on eagles than they would passerines, for instance. And so it's important to kind of look into the data, and how we react to that is through sighting and mitigation. All energy production has an impact on the environment. Even the ones that we want that we can claim is green, like hydro dams have impacts on fish and fish migration, forage sources for birds. Wind has a low carbon footprint, but it does have direct mortality on birds like golden eagles. And so we just want to make sure that we do not need to commit the sins of the fossil fuel industry prior to the clean energy revolution. We believe the transition to climate smart energy is really important, but let's be smart about where we put them and make sure that we're mitigating as much as possible the impact on the environment and to birds. We have the ability to do so, and we should commit to that. As for solar, it depends again on where you're putting them. Obviously, for ground birds like sage grouse or prairie chickens, it's not great. They're going to avoid that habitat. But there are new studies coming out studying what they call agrovoltaics, and this is where you can space out solar panels while growing crops and mix seed grasses in between them. And results are not necessarily conclusive, but what we're seeing is that there might be a way to do it in a fashion that is again smart siting, and each site, depending on the biome the project is in, might have different prescriptions to make sure they reduce their impacts. So again, it's good technology. We need the energy, but it's project and site specific. Let's see here. Go through some questions here. Do any of the policies that we work on help reduce the threat that outdoor cats pose to birds and to the health of people? I'm curious if Hardy or Annie wants to take a go at that. I can also go first, but I just got done talking.
We have a fabulous team member on the Advocacy and Threats team, Grant Sizemore, who's our Director of Invasive Species Programs, who spends a lot of time on this question. We definitely advocate for policies that help make it less enticing to have lots of free roaming outdoor cats. And if you check out our website, we have an action that you can take to help add your name to a growing list of people that want to see some more policy developed around this. And we know it's a very sensitive issue. So Grant does a fantastic job of going where there's a really, really great chance for action. So I know I'm kind of dancing around it a little bit because it's not my area of expertise, but I'll say yes, it is definitely something that we work on. To my knowledge, we are the only organization that has a full-time person who devotes
Mhm.
most of their time to this issue, and he's done really amazing work. So, yeah, and in the meantime, something you can do at home. Keep your cat inside. If you take it outside, put it on a leash, build a catio. I used to pet sit a cat that had a cat stroller that zipped up. It was a lot of fun for everybody. So, keep your cats indoors.
Yeah, now that you've given me a break to from talking, Hardy, I can jump in. There's two prominent issues with cats. There's unowned and owned cats, and the way that you can manage their impact on birds is through behavior change of people, and how they manage their own pets, and policies that can help sort of scale up. Like we have dogs on leash policies, and that really can change the culture in America about how we treat dogs. On the policy front, we are working in places where cats are having outsized impact on birds, especially imperiled birds. And a great example of that is in Hawaii, banning the feeding on state lands and county lands of feral colonies, working with shelters to get them rehomed, removed from the landscape, monitoring efforts. Um, uh, Chipping, sterilization of cats, with exceptions for breeders, things like that. There's a lot of things in the policy world we can do that are agreeable with the animal welfare organizations as well and perspectives. Let's see, Hardy, I've got one for you. We have about 4 more minutes left for questions, and then we'll wrap it up here. But what is ABC doing to eliminate lead in bullets and rodenticides?
On the lead ammunition front, we are really excited to see that there's been a lot more programs going for voluntary approaches. So, educating hunters and anglers about spent lead ammunition or, leaving hooks or sinkers, typically it is, in different fishing weights that could be lead based in the environment. Birds eat them either. If it's something like a dove or a duck, they might directly eat little bits of lead sinker or lead shot. If it's something like an eagle, they could scavenge on a carcass of a deer or something that has been shot with lead and then ingest it that way. So we are working in a lot of different, or at the state level in a lot of different states to advocate for more programs that educate hunters and have incentives for them to trade out some of this toxic ammunition and toxic fishing tackle. At the federal level, there's a really great program that the Fish and Wildlife Service has been doing on national wildlife refuges to offer free ammunition that's lead free to hunters and educate them about its benefits. So we're supporting all of that. That is one of our big appropriations asks that we do every year, and we'd like to see a lot more of it. For rodenticides, we work at the state level on a lot of different bills and at the county level on regulations to help reduce the amount of anticoagulant rodenticide that is put out into the environment. We're working with the EPA right now on some of their new rodenticide restricting regulations that they're supposed to be coming out with later this year as well. So we try to hit it everywhere that we can, and we're excited to see that there are a lot of individual communities as well. So at the town level or city level that have decided to stop using anticoagulant rodenticides, and we have helped to write some of those regulations or point interested people to other communities that have already done it. And I will, Brian, if you'll allow me, I'd like to segue that over to Annie into a how can people do more if they want to? Where can they find information about what they can do?
Yeah, I mean, the ABC website is a great resource, so definitely check out our action alert page, which we'll be sure to link in the chat. Making your voice heard is super important, so contacting your representatives, whether that's through an action alert or by calling them, these are all great ways to get involved. And then I would also say, please reach out with questions. We are always happy to answer questions, give you, links and resources and whatnot to help you get more engaged. And also, we love to hear from members about what is impacting their communities and how we can be helpful. So, yeah, lots of ways to get involved.
Alrighty. Well, we are just at time. One last question to ask for all of us. I'll let one of you go first. What is the one thing you hope people take away from this webinar and share with a friend?
I guess,
Go ahead, Annie.
yeah, I can jump in first. I think finding unique connections to different issues is really important. I think sometimes we think, oh, it's just about the birds. Often it's not. It's about the connections the birds have to people or to other issues. So I just always urge people to think about how birds connect you in your life and connect people with other issues. Because I think, again, to the point of data is important, but the narrative part is also important, and thinking about how birds can be a vehicle to improve not just a single species, but the environment and communities as well.
Thanks, Annie. Hardy?
I would say that there are a lot of different ways that you can take action on a direct front. You can use fewer pesticides or no pesticides at home. You can keep your cat indoors. You can talk to a friend about what's important to you. And you can reach out to your representatives. You can let them know what's important to you. And our whole job is making it easier for you to do that. So we would love to hear from you about it. But the other thing that I would love for people to take away is that one of the coolest things about American Bird Conservancy is most of our staff is out in the field doing habitat restoration, counting birds, cleaning up beaches, finding new ways to reduce threats from avian malaria in Hawaii by dropping stuff out of helicopters. It's bananas. It's amazing work. And then you also have this team of dedicated advocacy folks who can take all the great science, all the great field work that's being done, all the concerns of our supporters, and help elevate that at a federal, state, local level for new policy. So it's really the one-two punch for birds, and I love for people to hear about that because it's not as exciting as throwing stuff out of a helicopter when you write a detailed comment period letter, but it's just as important.
My answer to this question is to instill a sense of agency in people and hope. Birds really need us right now more than ever. We can still make a difference. We talked about a lot of those things today. And it's easy to be consumed in white noise on the news right now. But if we remain focused, we can really make a difference here. And I think that that's what I want folks to take away from this webinar is that even, you know, it's important and we can still get things done. And we need to continue to deliver support for bird conservation to Congress. We did that in a big way, and that is really reflected in the budget that was put on the president's desk. And we need to continue to ride that momentum. So, thank you, Hardy and Annie, and thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It means the world to us. It's more important than ever to be paying attention, as I said before. With threats to birds that need to be defended, there are also many opportunities to advance conservation. Um, it's easy to see to be like I said to lose focus, but we are here to tell you that there are good things getting done. When you see an action alert by ABC, that means that we have an issue that has real potential for moving the needle or a critical program that needs defensive support. Despite all the noise in our lives, we are, and we will get things done for birds if we all stay focused. Thank you again for joining us. All registrants will receive a link to the recording via email in just a few days. The efforts you've heard about today are only possible thanks to American Bird Conservancy supporters who care about birds and believe in ABC's mission to conserve them. I ask that you join us and take bold action for birds in 2026 by making a gift to directly support our policy and advocacy work. Your support keeps us on the front lines in the fight for bird-friendly policies and critical protections that birds need, giving them a voice where they need it most. You can make a gift now by visiting abc.org/policy, by scanning the code on your screen with your phone, or via the secure donation form you'll be directed to as soon as this presentation ends. Thank you for caring about birds and taking bold action to secure their future.
Thanks, everyone.